Hey y'all, it's Jessica from Sloppy Swatches. Today I have a look at the Sophisticates collection that is available right now from Zoya. These were sent to me for review and I'll link their storefront down below. I know that I'm a little bit late on this collection. I did kind of get behind due to Hurricane Harvey and the havoc that it wreaked. I am going to try to do something for my community soon, so be on the lookout for that. I'll link any information that I have in the description box below for that as well. So I'll go ahead and get right into this swatch and review. So first up is McKenna, and this is described as a refined pearl in a soft almond base. So this is a nude polish. It is described as having an intensity of 5 in terms of opaqueness, so it's supposed to be super, super opaque. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot. It does have a very subtle shimmer running throughout there, and then I'll show you how McKenna swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. Yes, my nails are yellow. I don't even remember which polish it was that stained my nails, but this does go on really nice, really smooth. I did find that the creams in this collection, in my opinion, are a little bit thinner than Zoya's usually are, so I did have a little bit of issues with application in terms of like pooling and things like that. I do recommend going in for thinner coats with this collection, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how it's swatched with a second coat. This second coat did bring it completely opaque. I do tend to kind of go in a little bit thicker with these polishes, so I think that it made my application a little bit wonky. I also did notice that the polish tended to drip down the stem as well, so even if I brushed it off really well, I did still have some drippage, so you just may want to keep that in mind. But here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before, glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting, and here's a view once more from a different angle. I do love this nude shade, especially on my skin. So next up is Beth, and she's described as a soft, sandy champagne metallic. So this does have a very strong shimmer in here. It does translate really well to the nail. I think this is going to be beautiful matte. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Beth swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. Again, this one did get a little bit thin on me. It was a little bit sheer here at the beginning, but it still went on nice and easy. I just really do recommend going in for thinner coats. I did have a little bit of brush stroking here while I'm applying it, but it did kind of level out all on its own. It's not something that you're going to have to worry about too much. So there's a look at that first coat. I'll show you how it built up with a second coat for me. 2 coats did bring this one completely opaque. Again, I just was a little bit mindful with application. I tried to go in a little bit thinner, and it worked out beautifully. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before, glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting, some minimal brush stroking still going on there. Here's a view from another angle under that same artificial lighting. So next up is Presley, and this is described as a smoky mauve taupe cream. So this one is a very subtle, super appropriate for fall. I think this is going to be a beautiful color all year round. A little bit more on maybe the old lady side of what I would think of as an old lady color, but super flattering. So I'll go ahead and show you how Presley swatched on my natural nail. Again, there I did go in with a thicker bead than I intended to because I did notice a little bit of pulling. And you can see it just kind of steadily dripped down the stem. As much as I wiped, you just need to be a little bit mindful. 1 coat did make for pretty awesome coverage. I'll go ahead and let that dry and then show you how it built up for me with the second coat. Again, I did get a pretty big sized bead, bigger than I meant to, but 2 coats, it does bring this one completely opaque. I do just feel like these are a little bit on the thinner side. Most of the time with Zoya creams, I can get them opaque in just 1 easy coat. Here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before, glossy top coat, so nice and glossy finish. And this is my final swatch photo at an angle under that artificial lighting. So next up is Joni, and she's described as a deep, dusty plum cream. So this is a little bit deeper in hue than the other colors, very rich, perfect for fall and even into the winter. I'll go ahead and show you a quick brush shot, and then I'll show you how Joni swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. Again, just maybe a little bit on the thinner side. It did pull up a little bit down the stem for me, but 1 coat made for beautiful application here. Very nice glossy finish. Honestly, you may be able to get away with 1 coat with this polish, but I did kind of miss the edge of my nail, as I tend to do while I'm filming because that's the far side from my field of vision. So the second coat does for sure bring it completely opaque. I did have a little bit of flooding there, but it was no problem to clean up with acetone and a cleanup brush. I had no staining issues or anything like that. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before, glossy top coat under artificial lighting. So again, a beautiful glossy finish. Here's a swatch photo from an angle under that same lighting. So next up is Padma, and I am pretending that this is named after the character in the Harry Potter world. This is described as a deep vermilion red cream. However, I did get very bright pink tones for me in this polish. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Padma swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. This is more what I expect from Zoya creams. It did go on nice and smooth, really creamy. I did have a little bit of issue with it dripping down the stem, but maybe not as bad as some of the others. In one coat, this is pretty much completely opaque. I am going to go ahead and go in for a second coat just for consistency's sake. 2 coats for sure brings it completely opaque and fills in any low spots that I may have had. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. I think that you can tell in my camera that this is pulling a little bit more pink than red for me. So this is my final swatch photo at an angle in that artificial lighting. And next up is Hera. She's described as a muted red mauve cream. So this one has even brighter pink tones for me in person than even Padma did. So I do think of this as a pink polish. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Hera swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. Again, I did go in a little bit thicker than I intended to. I do really feel like thinner coats are going to be the best option with this collection. So this is a really thick, heavy 1 coat, but it did bring this one completely opaque. I did miss that little edge of nail there towards the right side of the camera. So I'm going to go in for a second coat, and I missed it again, but 2 coats for sure is going to bring this one completely opaque for you. No issues at all. Here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. So this is giving me very strong pink vibes. Here's a view from another angle underneath artificial lighting. Maybe it gives a different feel in natural lighting. I've not had much of that to play with. So now on to the more darker tones. This is Hadley, and she's described as a smoky midnight blue cream. I do get a very strong teal vibes in there as well. Super deep, very dark, very vampy, and I love it. Here's a look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Hadley swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. I was so worried about this one being a stainer because it is just so deep and so smoky and pigmented. If you go in for a thin coat, it is going to be maybe a little bit streaky. I did end up going in for a thicker coat, and it brought this one completely opaque in 1 easy coat. I do feel like the formula is maybe a little bit thicker as well, a little bit easier to work with, so 1 coat was all that I needed. Here's a look at that completed mani at 1 coat before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting, so it is a very deep on the nail. This is my final swatch photo at an angle underneath that artificial lighting. So next up is Tabitha, and she's described as a refined pearl in a deep hunter green. If you are as obsessed with the winter mattes as I am, you'll think that this might look a little bit like Verushka, and I totally get that. It feels like Verushka, but with a glossy finish. I really enjoyed it. So here's a look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Tabitha swatched on my natural nail. Again, with that big old bead on the end of my brush, even after wiping it off, you just want to be a little bit careful of that. 1 coat went on pretty smooth, a little bit thinner, maybe with some flooding and a little bit of brush stroking, but really no issues at all. It's still kind of user-friendly. I'll go ahead and let that dry and then show you how it builds up for me in a second coat. I do feel like this one for sure needs at least 2 coats. If you go in thinner, you may need 3, but I was really happy with the finish at just 2. It did have some minor brush stroking that kind of settled down on its own and really leveled out with a glossy top coat. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. Again, very deep and vampy. I think that this could take you all the way through the winter. This is my final swatch photo at an angle underneath artificial lighting. So next up is Gal, and this is described as a smoky iridescent peridot gold metallic. So they seem to feel like this one shifts from a green color to a gold. I got mostly the gold in there, kind of like Ziv with those little bit of flaky textures in there. Not that you can feel it, it's nice and flat. I'll go ahead and show you a quick brush shot, and then I'll show you how Gal swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first coat. This one is very sheer. It does go on nice and smooth, really lovely to work with. It's just going to be one that you're going to have to build up. I think that the finish kind of reminds me of Aggie. Unfortunately, I do not have that polish in my collection to compare them. I'll go ahead and let that dry and then show you how Gal builds up with a second coat. So here's a look at that second coat. It does definitely help build up that metallic kind of foil-like finish. However, I did have a little bit of nail line still hanging around, so I'll go ahead and let that dry and then show you how it builds up for me with a third and final coat. So here's a look at my third coat. I did go in a little bit thicker for this third coat, but it did completely bring this one opaque. Again, maybe a little bit mindful with those brush strokes. They do tend to level out all on their own though. So here's a look at that completed mani at 3 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. This is my final swatch photo at an angle underneath that artificial lighting. So next up is Elaine, and she's described as a dark umber brown cream. So this did feel like a very cool toned brown for me, very deep, super gorgeous, especially if you need a brown in your collection. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Elaine swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. This one does feel a little bit squishy, a little bit jelly. It did start out kind of sheer. So this first coat just brings down a nice base. It was a little bit on the thicker side for me though, so it did make application a little bit easier. I feel like if you go in for a nice healthy thick first coat, you could get away with just one. I am going to go ahead and show you how it built up for me with a second coat. So here's a look at that, and it did bring it completely opaque for me with another beautiful glossy finish. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. Again, you can't see that super glossy finish, however, I do definitely recommend a nice glossy top coat to help extend that wear time. This is my final swatch photo at an angle under that artificial lighting. So next up is Mona, and this is described as a deep burgundy plum cream. So this is what I think of when I think of my favorite types of red for fall, very deep and vampy. I'll go ahead and show you a quick look at that brush shot, and then I'll show you how Mona swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. Again, I did have a little bit of polish that wanted to go down the stem, but this did feel a little bit thicker in formula for me. So with one coat and really careful application, I was able to get this one completely opaque. If you go in for thinner coats, of course, you may need more. Here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting. I did have some very minor cuticle staining with this one. So that is my final swatch photo at an angle under that artificial lighting. So lastly today I have Ivonne, and this is described as a rich Bordeaux red cream. So I did pick up some bright pink tones in here, but this is definitely more of a red shade. I'll go ahead and show you a quick brush shot, and then I'll show you how Ivonne swatched on my natural nail. So here's a look at that first easy coat. This one was maybe a little bit more squishy and a little bit more on the jelly side, but it did go on really smooth and easy. I did kind of make sure that I brushed off my brush really well with this one, but even still with a thicker first coat, this one would be completely opaque in just one. I did notice a few low spots, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how it looks with a second coat, and for sure the second coat does bring this one completely opaque. Again, I did have some staining around my cuticle area with removal of this polish, but nothing on the nail, and I do wear my base coat always. So here's a look at that completed mani at 2 coats before a glossy top coat underneath artificial lighting, and this is my final swatch photo at an angle under that same artificial lighting. So that does wrap up my swatch and review of the Sophisticates collection from Zoya. Again, these are available right now. If you'd like to see more photos, I do have those available on my blog at sloppyswatches.com, or you can also follow me on Instagram at sloppyswatches. So thanks so much for watching, guys. See you next time.